Barry, the Pervert. I'll start this by saying I am a 29-year-old female from a small town in northern Tennessee. The kind where everyone knows everyone, and the kind where you have to drive 30 minutes to an hour to a job that pays a living wage. So when my dad started his new job, around 9 years ago, he found out he was working at the same place as a friend he knew growing up, Barry. I'll also tell you that I was bullied a lot growing up, so I took compliments as jokes mostly. So when I first met Barry, he would compliment me and tell me how pretty I was. I was 20 at this time, and I always thanked him for the kind words. As time went on, the compliments got more intense. He would say he'd love to be with a woman my size. I always laughed it off and never said anything. This went on at company picnics and holiday parties I went to with my dad for about 4 years. Then I got a job with the same company, in the same department as Barry. Things were okay for the 3 months he trained me. He still complimented me daily, and I thanked him for the compliments. After my training, I went to night shift and only saw him for the 30 minutes of overlap per shift. Then 7 months into the job, my boyfriend and I broke up. Barry was sympathetic at first, then became a different person. His compliments became more focused on my body and not my face. He would stare at certain body parts while speaking to me and cock his head to the side while standing behind me if I bent down to pick something up. As a woman in a prominently male work environment, I was used to being stared at, but this was excessive. When I became single, he would also ask me about my sexual history, my preferences in the bedroom, if I'd be with a man of his age, early 50s, or a man of his size, 5 foot and over 300 pounds. He'd become frustrated when I told him no. Declining everything he asked me never stopped him. He just upped his game. He'd start talking about me and my body to other people at work and asking them questions about me, or trying to get them to ask me the questions he wanted answers to. He did this numerous times to my best friend, who we'll call Jay for privacy reasons. Well, luckily for me, Jay just so happened to have a massive crush on me. He'd never do anything Barry asked of him, and he always told me everything Barry said or asked. This continued on for around 8 months, and then Barry came to night shift. So my 30 minutes with him became 8 hours. He would start telling me all about his sex history, unprompted. The questions, comments, and staring never stopped. To give you a small example, this man asked me if he won the lottery, would I sleep with him for money? I said no. He offered me $1,000 one time to have sex with him, and I said no. I told him there is no amount of money in the world to make me sleep with him. He got mad at that. He'd ask for nude pictures, which I said no to. He'd ask Jay to try to sleep with me and take pictures and videos. He also said no. This all led to me being constantly stressed out and always looking over my shoulder to see if he was staring at me when I had to bend over to pick up something, or if I had to reach for something. I'm a very petite woman, and all my work clothes at the time were about 2 sizes too large, so you couldn't see my body shape at all. I did that to try and make him stop staring, but it didn't matter. He still did. I stopped talking to him. I stopped being in his vicinity, but he continued. His comments were just to other people in the building, mainly Jay. It came to a breaking point one week when my supervisor told me that my department had to work one weekend, alone, just Barry and myself on our shift. I begged him not to make me come in. I told him I would call out and take a point or whatever I had to. I told him how scared I was to be alone with that man. I told him no man should be alone in a building this size with a woman, period. He listened and canceled the overtime. He made sure I was never alone with Barry without a third person around. I finally broke down and told about it all. That turned out to be a waste of time. It continued for 6 more months, but thankfully I was on medical leave for surgery for 2 of those months. Then, in November of last year, the right person on my shift heard me crying and complaining to Jay about everything before going home one night, and they complained to HR on my behalf. They finally opened an investigation. They asked me a ton of questions, and my answers filled up 2 notebook pages, front and back, of just the comments and questions from him over 3 years. They asked Jay a ton of questions, and a few other people who worked around us, and 3 days later, he was finally let go for harassment. He threatened me the day they put him on suspension for the investigation, and he was banned from company property unless he wanted to be arrested. I filed a no-contact order against him and haven't heard from him in over a year. Jay finally told me that Barry had admitted to him at one point shortly before he was let go that if he ever got me alone, he was going to rape me and do ungodly things to me and then just leave my body somewhere. So I am extremely grateful to my supervisor for not letting that happen to me. I had to type this out twice to get my thoughts in order. But the thing that bothers me a lot about all this, Barry had a daughter a year younger than me, and she had nothing to do with him when I knew him. I can't help but wonder what abuse he possibly put her through growing up. It has been over a year since this all came to an end. I'm no longer scared at work. I'm not on edge or stressed out. But as long as Barry is living and breathing in my hometown, I will not live there. And he's made a lot of enemies in that small town because of this. That happens in small towns when your parents know everyone, including the sheriff. Oh, And about Jay? His massive crush paid off, and we're now dating. I've never felt safer with anyone in my life. So Barry, the pervert who made my work life hell for 3 years, let's never meet again. And to any other girl or woman who is being harassed at work, don't be afraid to speak up. I promise you, it's worth it to tell someone. Horrible Halloween. Me and a friend were invited to a house party just for college students in the richer area of the town. So the house was huge, with an acre of land and pool area. This party was themed to be a little naughty, so my friend dressed in a sexy nurse outfit, and I dressed as a belly dancer. Majority of the party took place in the house, as there was maybe like 70 people, with the house being very spacious, so not too difficult to get around. I'm not much of a drinker, but I did have some juice that was available. Some friends pulled me and my friend and over to take some pics, and I set my drink down. After what felt like an hour of just taking pictures, I found my cup and took another sip, not even worrying that I left my cup alone for a while. Then a man came up to me, who looked to be in his late 20s, early 30s. He said my boyfriend's name and said he's been trying to call me. That's when I realized I didn't have my phone on me. I have loads of respect for my boyfriend. We always make sure to stay in contact with each other. And since he had to work, I promised I would contact him, but I'd just forgotten. The man said it's urgent, and said I can use his phone to call in one of the rooms. So, not thinking at all, I followed the man. If my boyfriend really wanted to call me, then I knew it would be something terrible. As we entered the room, I felt as if I just ran a mile and felt winded. The man closed the door behind me and sat me on the bed and gave me his phone. I started to feel more weak, like I just got a migraine and just couldn't call. Then I was helped to lay down, and within seconds I was out cold. I woke up later, not sure where I was or what even happened. I found my friend rubbing a napkin on my tummy while yelling. It took me a bit to come back to reality, and I realized I was in a bedroom with my friend cleaning some stuff off of me. That's when I had a panic attack and just realized that I quite possibly have been used. My friend calmed me down and told me that didn't happen. She explained that she couldn't find me anywhere and assumed I went to the bathroom. But after like some minutes, I still didn't show. So she went looking for me, eventually checking the bedrooms, and found me laying in bed with the guy, something out of my belly button. Apparently, he was playing shots with my unconscious body of sucking alcohol out of my belly button, licking salt from my chest, and kissing my lips. She didn't know how long this went on for, but I immediately felt sick and even coughed up from just the thought. Thankfully, my boyfriend got off work early after my friend told him what happened. He picked me up while my friend asked around about the guy, but of course, No one knew of him or recognized him. I was taken to urgent care and looked at. Thankfully, nothing was wrong with me, and the drug in my drink didn't cause any further harm than just knocking me out. I wish the story ends here, but I started to receive texts from a random guy. At first, he was just asking me random things, and I just didn't reply. But then he showed me a pic of my torso and started saying creepy things to me, and even giving me the impression he's stalking me. This is still going on today, just texting me randomly. I've had the idea to try to bait him one of these days, to finally have backup to catch him. But I don't know how smart he can be, and what he will do to me if things don't go as planned. Because of my past trauma, and now this, I often find it hard to trust strangers. As far as an update, I stopped receiving texts from the guy just before Christmas. However, I often feel a weird sense that I'm being followed when I'm in public, and there have been a few instances that I thought I've seen the man again. I still am spooked at random times when a random man looks at me for too long, but I've learned to get over my past traumas, so I hope to do the same for this one. I have contacted the police and asked what I can do. They took my phone in to copy the texts I received, but I'm sort of doubtful it will go anywhere. I honestly just believe it was a stranger who had bad intentions at the time and acted upon it. I'm not really even upset anymore. I just want to continue with my life and better myself from any other future events. Leave me alone. The man who has been watching me as I come home from school has started walking back and forth to and from the sidewalk in front of my house again. He has done this 3 times, and every time I've seen it, I've been home alone. I've called my mother to let her know every time he's been around, and we have contacted the police to tell them that he keeps coming by our house, but they haven't been able to do anything except record it, since he's never actually stepped foot on our property until recently. Starting this week, I started noticing tapping and scratching sounds from downstairs, starting as soon as it becomes dark. It's been worrying me a great deal, but I've been too scared to look outside until recently, because my dogs weren't barking, and they always do if someone strange is outside. When I finally got the courage to look out, I saw a person hunched over a few feet away from the entrance to our house. I couldn't see any of their facial features because they were wearing a large hoodie and keeping their face down. It looked like they were scraping something across the siding of our house. Immediately, I dialed the police and hid somewhere in case they wanted to break in. As soon as the police arrived, though, the person ran off and was not pursued. I spoke with the police when they started to check things out, but again, nothing could be done, as there wasn't any proof that anything had even happened at all, besides them seeing him run off. They said they'd be keeping an eye on it in the future. but at the very most, it was only trespassing. I brought up the fact that I was attacked not long ago by some strange man, and that I thought they were the same person, but I was once again brushed off. The police said it was possible, but without any actual evidence that they were the same person, nothing could be done, since I couldn't accurately recognize the person outside my window, and I also wasn't seriously hurt. I don't know what kind of evidence is needed to do something about someone stalking a minor who is home alone, but apparently I didn't have it. This morning, a small brown package was left on the doorstep, and in it were pieces of electronic parts that I did not recognize, and plastic shards with the crumpled newspaper at the bottom, and a note that said, "Sorry," with a frowny face at the top. My mother notified the police, and again, they said they'd just keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I feel like they're not doing anything, and that they won't do anything until I'm seriously hurt, or worse. Now I keep glitter spray with me when I walk home from school, along with my screwdriver and a knife in my room, just in case someone breaks in, but I can't do anything else, and I'm not confident at all that I could win a fight against a fully grown man. I'm worried about what will happen in the future, and I don't even feel safe in my own home. Even when the doors are locked, I check every possible place someone could be waiting for me before settling down, but I don't think it's enough. Roller coaster. It all started when I wanted to further my education and get a bachelor's in information systems. To give a little about myself to help paint the picture, I'm 26, 4'8", female. I get called jailbait often because I look way younger. During the beginning of my studies, my current boyfriend and I had broken up, so I told myself it would be best to stay single until I finished school. I took to the internet after my breakup, as most do, just looking for company. I had found this one group on Facebook where I felt like I belonged. I got along well with everyone, and I loved to flirt in this group. That's where I met him. Let's call him Kemper. Like many others before him, I had latched my claws into him and began flirting. I even had a little crush on him. Things began innocently. I flirted, and he flirted back in the group. He seemed very mysterious, though. I guess that's what drew me to him. He didn't have a profile pic, not of him at least. He never told me his age or what he looked like. After a few weeks of flirting, a woman in the group we were both in had mentioned that it was his birthday. I knew I wanted to do something for him, but I was pretty limited on what I could do. Now, before I get hell for this, just know, I have never sent an unsolicited topless picture to another man. Not until that day, at least. On the pic, I wrote "Happy Birthday," insert his name, and pressed the send button on Messenger. Just that split-second decision has changed my life the past 2 years. It's so easy looking back and thinking what you could have done differently, but there is no going back now. Within a week of talking non-stop to Kemper, he was already telling me he loved me. He was working as a truck driver, but at the time he had broken his knee at work, so he was out of commission for a few months, which allowed him to talk to me as much as possible. During this time, I was working as a delivery driver with DoorDash. It was easier for me to make my own schedule, since I wasn't done with school just yet. The first few months were great. We would talk constantly over the phone and through Messenger. Also, let me point out quickly that this was a long-distance relationship between Kemper and myself. So I remember the first fight we ever had. Hell, even before then, I could see the red flags slapping me in the face at every turn. However, our first fight was because I was texting him while driving. He flipped his lid and totally went crazy on me. It was very unexpected, and it made me cry. I can't tell you how many times I tried to apologize and tell him it wouldn't happen again. After the incident, I was blown away how easily something so little, or at least I thought it was little, would make him do a complete 180. Months go by, and the fights continue, more frequently. One point, he had mentioned how cool it would be to have an app where we could see each other's location. In my naive and in-love state, I did some quick search and found an app called Life 360. We both downloaded the app, and now he could see everywhere I go. At first, it was a neat idea to say the least. To follow him around everywhere he went, to feel closer and more connected to him. That's what I used it for. He, however, wanted to use it for different reasons. I learned over time how controlling, manipulative. We would argue about things, and even when I got mad, he would somehow turn things around on me and make me feel like I'm the bad guy. He had broken up with me on the group we were both in, just because I had flirted with another guy, and he didn't like it. He was telling the other guys in the group how much of a whore I was, and how they could have me. He even threatened to give out my address to the guys in the group, so they can come to my house and, well, I'm sure you get the idea. My friend, let's call him Ozzy for the sake of the story. He was a member of the group, and he could tell how upset I was in the group comments, and he messaged me personally for the first time. Now, let me tell you, I don't know what it is, but seems like I attract monsters. Monster is the best way to describe Kemper and Ozzy. They are both well-off men, with the world at their fingertips. I guess that's part of the controlling bits, or showing aggression when they don't get their way about things. Before I go into more detail about Ozzy, I just want to recount a few incidents with Kemper to give the readers a better understanding of what kind of man he is, and how dumb I am letting things to continue the way they have. One incident happened months ago. He and I were fighting, seemingly over nothing, and I was driving home from a long day of work and school. and Kemper just blurts out, "I wish you would just run off the road and into a ditch and die." I was speechless. The tears welled up in my eyes, and the driving became harder because I couldn't see, so he almost got his wish. I had to stop at the Dollar General in my town to compose myself. I couldn't breathe. I was wheezing. The man I had thought I loved was wishing I would die. If he hated me that much, why is keeping me around? I just wanted to curl into a ball at the moment and just disappear for a while. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't just stay parked at Dollar General. I was really at a loss for what to do. It wasn't until a while later where I told my mom and dad what he said. They were already getting their pitchforks ready, wanting to reenact the Salem witch trials because of him, and ever since then, they haven't liked him. Another incident, he and I were talking about meeting, and he told me that we would need the Menopause Act in place. Yeah, he made that up, but basically, he doesn't want to have sex in the off chance we get pregnant. He told me if I ever did get pregnant, he would make me have a maternity test to see if it's his, and then he would make me abort the child. He doesn't want kids, but I do, so of course I was really upset, and he made me cry yet again. Making me cry is a common occurrence with him over the last 2 years. One night, another fight breaks out, and he loves to drink beer. He loves to hurt me even more by saying beer is his best friend and beer would never disappoint him like I do. During this late night phone call, he was extremely drunk, and he was threatening to kill himself. I just couldn't take the arguing, so I bid him a good evening and let that be that, and I hung up on him. I received a large number of texts saying all sorts of things, but one really stood out. He wrote, "If I kill myself tonight, it'll be because you made me do it." I didn't see these until the next morning, but you can imagine how panicked I was. My heart just sank, and of course, tears. He's good at making me feel like crap, good at manipulating, lying, controlling. It's just all becoming way too much. It's really more than anyone should deal with, no matter how much you love someone. The next day, I begged him to get help for his drinking, his depression, his suicidal behavior, but he just refuses. Being so far away, there's only so much I can do. Kemper has anger issues, along with so many other issues as well. I know I'm not perfect, but at least I don't act like he does. I'm very friendly, and I get along with almost everyone. I guess that's part of his problem with me. We are complete opposites when it comes to that. During our time together, I had gotten 2 other jobs at different times, besides the DoorDash gig. Just part-time though. Notice I said had gotten 2 jobs? Well, the first one was at Walgreens. The very first day on the job, I was doing certifications for the job, and during the whole time, he was blowing up my phone, telling me I don't need another job, or telling me that I won't have time for him, or that he would need to find someone else to replace the time I had spent with him while also keeping me around. I just couldn't take it, so I quit. Fast forward a few months later, I get another job. This one was at Dollar General, just at the town over. I did work there more than a day. I just recently had a talk with him about graduating soon, and how I will find a job at a hospital, working normal hours with better pay. Well, he didn't like that too much. He found some reason to be mad at me and start a fight, and he has gotten in the habit of ignoring me for a day or two. He's even ignored me for a whole week, and honestly, that was the most peace I had gotten in a long time. Things have just drastically gone downhill, and quick. He tells me all the time now how he doesn't trust me because I wanted to go on a date with a cop. This was some guy I had met at the gas station down from where I lived and gave him my Snapchat. He seemed nice, and I was curious what kind of pics he would post on Snapchat or send me. When the cop sent a dick pic, that's when he was blocked. And yes, I told Kemper about this. The incident with the cop had happened on one of the many times Kemper and I have broken up. I do respect him, as weird as that is to say. I would never go on another date with another man or flirt with another guy. I'm very friendly, and I guess some guys take that the wrong way. Now, Kemper tells me all the time I need to build trust because the incident with the cop has caused him to have trust issues. I even had a work colleague, yes, a guy, that works at a Mexican restaurant, offer free food, and boy do I love me some Mexican food. I see this guy quite frequently and talk to him when I see him because I pick up DoorDash orders from where he works. This guy has asked me out quite often, but I turn him down every time. So, he asked me if I would like free Mexican food, and we could just hang out at the restaurant and eat and talk as friends. I guess I really am naive, because I learned later on this guy had a crush on me. How did I find out he had a crush on me, you ask? Well, I was talking to him one day, maybe about a week after he offered me free food and just to hang, and he began to get extremely close to me, and he kissed me on the lips. At the restaurant where customers were sitting around eating. I jerked my head back and told him how inappropriate that was, and reminded him that I did in fact have a boyfriend, which he knew from the very beginning. I just don't understand men. I know how bad it seems, and you're probably thinking that Kemper has every right to have trust issues, but I respect him in every way possible, and every time and certain situation like this happens, I handle it the best way I know how. I didn't want to make a scene when the waiter at the Mexican restaurant kissed me. I guess I'm too nice for my own good. Now, in each fight Kemper and I have, he always tells me how much of a whore I am, or asks if I do OnlyFans. He even told me the reason why I deleted Life 360 the tracking app, is because I'm going off at night with other men and eating their buttholes. His words, not mine. But no, the reason why I deleted the Life 360 app is because I needed to gain some of the control back and some of my privacy back. As of right now, Kemper and I will have the chance to meet this coming January 2023, although I'm really not sure about it. 2 years of ups and downs, and him having my heart and ripping out when it's convenient for him, has me thinking it may not be the best idea. Also, it may be the fact that he has told me of his violent past with an ex-girlfriend of his. This happened many years ago, but it scares me knowing he can be this violent. What had happened was, his girlfriend at the time was putting on makeup. He hates makeup, and they got into an altercation with him blacking out and him pinning her down to the bed and choking her. He didn't even realize what he was doing until he came to. He's told me lately that if he ever caught me in his bed with another man, he would punch me in the face, not the guy, simply because the man didn't know better and I did. I've spent a lot of time and effort into this relationship and wanting it to work out in the end, but honestly, not sure if meeting would be the best thing to do, now or ever. So let's talk about Ozzy. He's a tad bit older than me. He's 49 years old, while Kemper is 48 years old. You would think they would be mature for their age. Well, Ozzy is very mature. Kemper not so much. Ozzy and I began talking the first time Kemper and I had broken up. He was being a concerned friend, and messaged me, asking me what was going on. I spilled everything to him. He was like a best friend I didn't know I had. He was so easy to talk to, and he even began opening up to me about his troubled upbringing. He would talk about everything, and things began to escalate into a more sexual topic. He would tell me about his dark fantasies, which at one point I would have shared with him, but not so much anymore. I'm more vanilla nowadays when it comes to stuff like that. After a month or so of talking, he too would begin to tell me he loved me, but only as a friend. I knew better than that, and it made me uncomfortable knowing that someone I've only had a handful of conversations with, which mostly consisted of sex talk, would tell me he loved me. Majority of the time, we would just exchange gifs, with a few voice clips shared between us. Over time, I felt bad for talking to this man, but he was a comfort when Kemper and I had broken up. But our conversations went from semi-normal just too weird. Let me mention real quick, just like Kemper, he too didn't have a profile pic, but he would post pictures of himself on the group, so I knew what he looked like, and he was a very handsome man. After a while of talking to him, he would send me some other pictures, which seemed to be newer pictures, which looked nothing like the pictures he had posted in the group. I didn't make a fuss out of it, just assumed the pictures in the group were older pictures. One day he had told me he was getting a haircut. I was trying to be polite and asked for a picture to see the new haircut. Days later, he finally sent me that picture. I wasn't sure who this person in the picture was. It looked absolutely nothing like the previous pictures he had sent. At the moment, I assumed I was being catfished, but it didn't matter to me, because looks really don't matter. A lot of the messages I receive from him is how he wants to breed me. He refers to himself as Mr. Wolf and tells me all the time how he wants to marry me and steal me away from Kemper and get me pregnant. He talks all the time about how we would make a beautiful child, and how he's very well off, so he would be able to have more children, and how much of a great life we would have. He even goes out of his way to find gifts and pictures of naked pregnant women being forced into brutal things. Things tend to get even darker at times. He has told me that he wants to have his way with me in front of Kemper while he's tied to a chair, and then have his way with Kemper next. One time, he was talking about some women in the Facebook group we were in, and just women in general, who would cheat on their husband and flirt with other men behind their husband's back. He would say how these women need to be taken care of, not the exact word he used, but I hope you get where I'm going with that. He tells me all the time how he knows high-end people, how he's good friends with the governor, and that he can find any kind of information about someone if he needs to. It's truly scary to say the least if this is all true, and my gut feeling is telling me that it is. Just one of the many reasons I began distancing myself from him. He's in the process of having a lawsuit settled, in which he would gain a large amount of money from it, which he really doesn't need. One day, he began sending me pictures of this piece of property with a large multi-million-dollar home on it with a cellar. He would tell me how he could convert the cellar into a dungeon and keep me there as his play toy. The more I write about things, the more I'm getting a better idea of how dangerous things can possibly be if I ever met either Kemper or Ozzy. Ozzy tells me all the time about his lawsuit and when it should be finished, and tells me he would love to take my mom and myself to dinner. I talk about my mom quite often to him because she plays a big part in my life, and I love her more than anything. So I live in the south by the Gulf, and Ozzy has friends over in this area. He wants to meet a few of his Facebook friends that live in this area, and had asked me to join him for a few weeks of traveling to meet some of his friends with him. That is, after his lawsuit is settled. That's a big nope from me. I barely even know him, much less his Facebook friends. So this is my story so far. Not sure how things will turn out, but as of right now, let's not meet. Kemper and Ozzy both scare me in ways I can't explain. I do love Kemper with all my heart, but he has a lot of issues he needs to work on before I could ever consider meeting him, so it may never happen. I'm really hoping once I get a job working at a hospital that I will be able to find someone normal to date and spend the rest of my life with. Kemper tells me sometimes I need to move on because he'll never change, and I'm beginning to believe it. At the moment, I feel like things with Kemper will never go any further than how they are. It's hard enough to get away from them, especially Kemper. He knows my address, phone number, email addresses. He can even make multiple Facebook accounts to send me messages. Even one time, I had blocked Kemper on everything. He found a way to send me a message from an unknown number asking me to unblock him so we can talk. The Ranger. A few years ago, my friend Tez and I set out on the great American road trip. We were going to drive from New York to Los Angeles, zigzagging through the country for 6 weeks. We were both in our early 20s, pretty broke, and as my mom had been a long-haul trucker, I suggested that to save a ton of money, we should sleep in the back of our hatchback. It was a pretty cozy setup. We bought some blankets and sheets at Goodwill and cut one of them up to make curtains. By the end of the first week, we'd gotten so we could set up camp in about 10 minutes. Luggage moved to the front, curtains up, bedding laid down and out for the night. We slept in parking lots, free campsites, rest areas, basically anywhere it seemed safe and semi-legal. There was never a night after the first night where we felt scared until the last week of the trip in Arizona. We were near Flagstaff and had gotten pretty used to our routine. We didn't go on a set schedule and would never drive more than 3 or 4 hours a day. No destination really in mind, outside a few must-see landmarks. We'd drive to places we found the night before on Google and take suggestions from other campers, locals, and people we met. We'd also gotten very good at making friends. We went to Denny's with a group of rednecks we met at a campsite, in the back of their pickup, because I got hungry and overheard them saying they were going to go. We met an 80-year-old cowboy who took us out drinking and taught us to line dance at a country bar. "Hope you're still kicking, Grandpa Mac." Played the guitar with some musicians in the middle of a thunderstorm. Got fed breakfast and dinner by tons of campers who invited us to hang out with them. Spent the 4th of July with a family who basically adopted us into their campsite. Grandma gave us some weed candy. Basically, every encounter we had with a stranger was a positive one. This night didn't look to be any different. We found a free campsite on Google and drove up into the woods, following our GPS. We were pretty far out of town, and something seemed a little bit off when we pulled up to the campsite. There was one RV parked, and 2 cars further up in the trees. We pulled up near the RV, and a man opened the door. Tez waved hello, and he just stared at her. His expression was completely blank. Then, as if she hadn't said anything, he just slowly closed the door again, staring at us the entire time. Figuring he just wanted some privacy, and thought we'd be obnoxious, we pulled further down the road and found a flat spot to park the car. Instead of our usual routine of setting up camp immediately while it was still light out, we goofed around for a while, smoking and laughing and taking dumb photos of ourselves. Tez pointed out a campfire further down the campsite, and we decided to go be friendly. We'd met so many cool people in the previous 5 weeks by just going up and offering beer or just chatting, so we wandered over. Near the campfire, there were 2 men, the owners of the cars we'd seen earlier. They seemed friendly, and we sat down to chat with them. They were drinking and smoking, and we sat down and had a beer with them. One of the men seemed pretty off, and we came to find out that the 2 of them didn't actually know one another. The older man was definitely on some sort of drugs. He was spinning in circles and talking about UFOs. However, he seemed harmless. This left us chatting with the younger man, who claimed to be a former park ranger. He was handsome and easygoing, and we spent several hours just chatting about our trip, families, everything. Then he started talking about the bear. He'd seen a bear earlier in the forest. Tez didn't believe him, and he pulled out his camera to show her photos of the bear. It was very close to the campsite, and we both were a little freaked out. It wasn't unheard of for one of us to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, so the idea of a bear hanging around in the night spooked us. The ranger just laughed, and then his expression changed completely. It's hard to describe, but his voice seemed somehow cold. He said, "If you get out of your car in the middle of the night, it's not a bear you should be worried about." I kept waiting for the laugh, or for him to nudge Tez with his elbow. Jokes on the foreigner and the city girl, right? He never did. I laughed awkwardly and made a dumb joke about serial killers in the woods. My friend laughed as well, and joked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We moved on to another subject, but within 5 minutes, the ranger had come back to it, and was talking about something grabbing us from our car in the middle of the night. No matter how we tried to steer the conversation away from serial killers, he kept latching back on. The older man was high as a kite at this point, and was staring at the stars, not talking. We'd just awkwardly laugh and sip our beer, and try to get the conversation going somewhere else. Then the ranger stood up and walked towards the cooler to get another beer. At this point, it's pitch black out, and I can't see anything outside the circle of light from the campfire. The beer cooler was outside of that circle. Suddenly, there is a red dot in the darkness, and it took a moment for me to realize that it's a camera. The ranger is holding a camera. He had taken a photo of us. I could see the screen on the digital camera lit up. Now, it wasn't odd for the people we met to ask to take pictures with us. My friend Tez is gorgeous. Dark hair, blue eyes, like a young Megan Fox, and we were friendly. People like having pictures of themselves. It was an entirely strange thing to have this person taking a photo of us without asking or even indicating that that's what he was doing. We were both staring at him like deer in the headlights at this point. But instead of realizing what he's doing is a bit weird, he checks his camera, adjusts some things, and takes another photo, this time with the flash. No asking us to smile, no proposing a group photo, and no explanation. After this photo, he comes back to the fire and sits down. Not a word said about the photo. At this point, me and Tez are mutually freaked out. We make some BS excuse that we need to go set up our campsite and nope the hell out. When we stand to leave, the UFO guy smiles and says to have a good night. Ranger, however, looks at us with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes and says, "Be careful out there. There's more than bears in the woods." Every hair on my body stood on end. I wasn't alone in my discomfort either, because Tez laughed a response out and pulled me away from the campfire towards our car. We rush back to the car, which we only found in the dark by referencing the RV, and jump in the front seats. My friend Tez is all but hyperventilating. Why did he take pictures of us? I was shaking. I responded, "I read that serial killers sometimes warn their victims." She stared at me for a second and locked the car doors. "Do you think he just took victim photos of us?" We both freaked out. She's in a full panic and turns the headlights on in the car. I immediately yell at her to turn them off, because now he knows exactly where our car is. God knows why, but that is the only night we'd not set up camp. We didn't need to tear anything down, so we just put the car in drive and floored it out of the campsite. As we got onto the dirt road, the ranger was walking towards our car with that same cold expression.